mother knows best. Listen to your mother. It's a scary world out there.
Today's book. I feel like I need to move closer. Maybe Scoochie Beach? Is that better? I don't know. Yeah, it's really not any better. I feel like I gotta sit up close. So if it looks like I'm uncomfortable, it's probably because I am. Which just goes with the theme of today's book, which, oh my gosh, guys. I should have made a really large margarita for. I don't have anything to make margaritas with, though, so I'm gonna have to suffer through it. Anywho, today's book is Mother May I by Joshilyn Jackson. And it's one of those books that really makes me wonder how people get published. It's also one of those books that makes me ask myself, or not ask myself, that makes me question my own ability to read and enjoy a book and like evaluate my standards, because I feel like the majority of the books that I bring to you, I don't like. I think there's a small percentage that are mediocre and an even smaller percentage that I absolutely love. But for the most part, the books that I'm reading, I don't like at all. Although I did see somebody posted to Instagram about some books that everybody loves that they couldn't get into. And they put Pride and Prejudice, Red Queen by Victoria Aveyard, and then Mortal Instruments by Cassandra Clare. And I partially agree with her. I thought Mortal Instruments was horrible. Is it Mortal Instruments? City of Bones. Okay, I'm kind of right all the way around. Part right, part wrong. It is the Mortal Instruments series, but it is the City of Bones book, like the one that brought everything to life. And so I thought the entire Mortal Instruments series was awful. Granted, I didn't actually read them, I listened to them, but I think that makes it even worse. Anybody who know who Ed Westwick is? Anybody heard or even seen Gossip Girl? Like, he's a legit actor, and they got him to narrate part of one of these books, and it was still terrible. But what confuses me is why, I mean, how many books are in this series? Like 6? I mean, the original series. Not all the stuff that came before, not all the stuff that's coming after, but there's a good number of books in the original series. And they have multiple narrators. I don't understand that. Like, there's a lack of continuity there. On one hand, I'm glad for it because I didn't like the first narrators, but then I didn't like the second narrator. So it's kind of like, thank you for giving me more opportunities to like your narration. But the fact that none of them do a sufficient job makes me think it's not me. That is just a really, really long-winded way of saying I'm not alone, okay? Some of these books that people think are so amazing, those views are not shared by everyone. I would love to know what your least favorite popular books are. Like, what are the ones where you're saying, how in the world did this get published? Or even, what are the ones you disagree with me on, where you're like, Beth, you loved this book and it was terrible. I really enjoy seeing different perspectives. But now, let's move on to the book of the hour, and that is Mother May I. Mother May I has a really great premise. I don't know what I expected from it, because the only memory I have is the recollection of reading the summary and being intrigued by it. Did I actually know what was going to happen when I started the book? Absolutely not. At first, I was impressed, only because I listened to it and it's narrated by the author. At first, I was like, the woman can read. But then, terrible story compounded by unfavorable narration, it torpedoed this novel for me. And the interesting thing is that it wasn't all bad narration. I'm assuming that the narrator, the author, used her regular speaking voice for the main character, and then all the other characters is when she manipulated her voice. It was the other characters that I thought were stronger narration, but then the narration, the main character, those were the ones that grated on my nerves, that were like nails on a chalkboard, which is especially painful because that is going to be the majority of the book. Why did I not like the narration? Because she sounded like a child. At a certain point in this book, when I could not take it anymore, I did Google to see how many people shared my opinions, but I feel like that's a really hard thing to do. When you go on Amazon, or you go on Goodreads, or you go on iBooks, the majority of the people leaving reviews, it's probably a small percentage of the people who actually read the book. And even then, I feel like most of the people who are going to leave reviews are going to leave favorable reviews. And so I don't know if my little sample reviews are truly reflective of how people truly felt about this book. But on the whole, it seems like people loved it. And I couldn't figure out why. I was looking into Kirkus, I was looking into Barnes & Noble, like legitimate sites. And it made me wonder if they actually read this book, because they kept saying it's masterfully crafted and really dark and deep. And I was like, okay, I don't know if they actually read this book or how well they read this book, or if they gave it like 5 chapters and they put it down because it was so bad, but then somebody paid them to give a good review, which I will never do, guys. I have Sell Perks. Actually, it's Scruples, not Sell Perks. If you know where Sell Perks came from, I'll give you a reward, like for real. Anywho, it seems that people thought she did a great job. So on that note, fine, check it out. But I thought it was incredibly boring. I don't even know when I started skipping. Probably the halfway mark, because that is what I try to give books. It has to be a truly horrendous book for me to start skipping early on. But I just keep hoping it'll get better. And that halfway mark is supposed to be like a wham bam thank you man. It's supposed to hit you in the gut, like make things really interesting. If I get to that point and nothing happens, then that's when I give myself permission to skip. But I think from the get-go, what I didn't get about this book, which is about a woman named Brynn who came from nothing, essentially, and then she marries this lawyer and she gets this highfalutin life in Atlanta. They have 2 daughters. 15 years later, they have an oops baby named Robert. She goes to her daughter's play practice, and the next thing she knows, her baby is missing. Like, she had him in his baby carrier, and somehow somebody was able to steal him. The book then goes through her steps of getting Robert back. Here's the big spoiler of it all. The woman who took the baby because her daughter, 40 odd years ago, had been dating Bree's husband's cousin. Dating is a loose term because this girl was from the wrong side of the tracks, but for some reason the cousin just kept going back to her. Trey, the husband, his story is that their threesome was consensual, but what we learn, or I don't know if I should say we learn, because something about this audiobook did not download correctly, and so I lost large chunks, and it was like the most important parts of the novel, wouldn't you figure? He says it was all consensual, but then the mother is saying it wasn't. And I guess there was photographic evidence. Again, this is stuff that I missed because somehow it didn't make it onto my phone. Oh my gosh, guys. in trying to find the name Lexi Pine, which is the name of the girl that I am going to get back to talking about, I remembered why I do this channel, because I cannot stand when people leave vague reviews, when they're like, this was a great book and the narration was awesome, it had great twists and turns, and I'm like, but who are the characters? What happened in the book? Like, tell me something instead of just something that everybody else ahead of you has already said. Anyways, Trey and his cousin Spence had a apparently non-consensual threesome with Lexi Pine. And then Lexi goes on to be a drug addict. Coral, her mother, discovers that she has cancer. That she has cancer and it's terminal. Her final act is to get Lexi clean. She sells her house. She basically gives everything she has to get Lexi into a program. Lexi ends up dying. She overdoses after getting out. From there, Coral is like, you know what? I know who's at fault for this. So she goes after Bree, because Bree is married to Trey, and Trey he was part of the problem, but he's also Spence's cousin, which just compounds his guilt. She steals Robert. She gives Lexi some instructions, and I have many, many issues with this part of the book, which I'll get into as soon as I finish my very long-winded synopsis. She tells Bree that she has to go home. Tell nobody, just go home. And when Bree gets home, she discovers a burner phone and a bottle of pills. She gets a phone call on the burner, and the mysterious woman tells her to go to a company party. Trey is out of town. Bree had not planned on going to this party, but she is told, go to this party, give Spence these pills, and she'll get her baby back. She's told that these pills are some kind of drug, and nothing will really happen, but it will cause Spence to make a fool of himself and therefore get his comeuppance. The pills, they turn out to be something a bit worse. They're more like poison, like cyanide pills, and so Spence ends up dying. This is when Bree gets her BFF Marshall involved, as well as another woman from the law firm who she had just discovered Spence harassing, like sexually harassing. And they go on, there's this investigation into who's behind all of this, and are they gonna get Robert back, and all this stuff. So in the end, they do. Coralie dies. She like succumbs to her cancer. And then after that, so there's kind of two epilogues. There's a true epilogue, and then there's the epilogue in which Bree and Trey are having dinner. Bree has recently learned the truth behind what happened with Trey, Spence, and Lexi Pine. She got Trey's version earlier in the story, and then she receives a letter from Coralie post-mortem that includes pictures. This harkens back to another part of the story that I kind of liked. There was just so much of this book that could have been done better, but it had good bones. This letter and these pictures reveal to her that he left a lot of things out, that he colored the story for his favor. Now, they're having this dinner, trying to reconnect and come to terms and all that good stuff. This woman comes in and she shoots Trey, he dies. And then we have the true epilogue in which Bree is now married to Marshall, and they're living there happily ever after. And that I really hated. Mostly because I didn't think it was necessary. Most of the book is narrated by Bree, but we do get a couple of chapters from Marshall, and it's from him we get an unrequited love. From her we do get some instances of when I was a teenager, when I was in college, we had moments. However, it didn't happen, or maybe we shared a kiss, or this or that or the other. But then he had ended up marrying her best friend, and that was its own little story that I thought was completely underdeveloped. But now his wife, Betsy, has died, and he, I guess, has begun to realize his feelings for Bree again. And so when we first meet him, she's all like, why is he acting so weird around me? He's not as friendly as he used to be. And then from him, we get this, I shouldn't feel this way about her, but I do, and I can't stop myself, and blah, 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 blah. But we don't, like, at least I never felt like they had chemistry. I never rooted for them, because from Bree's perspective, it was all about Trey. She loved Trey. Yeah, we got flashbacks or remembrances of almosts between her and Marshall when they were children or when they were young, but there was nothing that gave you the impression she harbored feelings for him. And then even at the end, when we learn of Trey's deception and his part in the threesome/rape, she's disgusted, but she still loves him. And even though she doesn't see how she could continue to live with this man who won't accept what he's done, you still get the sense that she loves him. She's not pining for Marshall. And then at the end, she's married Marshall? The romance wasn't set up enough for me to be like, that's what I wanted to happen. I actually felt bad that Trey died, and I hated it even more because he never admitted fault. And I think some of my issue with the rape is because I missed chunks, like in the narration, in the audiobook that didn't upload to my phone. And so I didn't get a true sense of what happened. So everything I say right here, just take it with a grain of salt because I'm lacking information. But I didn't know what side to be on. I think in the end, I think he was lying to Bree, and that whatever he and Spence did with Lexi was truly illegal. However, what I was given didn't actually lead me to see how what they did was not wrong necessarily, but how they did something wrong. And so the only thing that I'm really getting, or that I really got, was the woman who ultimately kills Trey. She kills him because Coral Lee sends her a letter as well, because what Coral Lee had done was she had kidnapped this woman's child and she'd actually killed him. Of course, the mother doesn't know that because she's under the assumption that she will get her child back. She'll get Jeffrey back because Marshall and Bree track her down. Somehow they figure out, because of clues that Coral Lee had given in a conversation, because Marshall is police/detective. He figures out who this child is, so they're able to track down the parents. It turns out that the husband had been a sorority brother of Trey's and Spence's, and he was huge into photography. And apparently he caught this whole menage a trois on camera, and somehow I think he had sent the pictures to Lexi back after it happened. I don't really know why. Maybe he was going to blackmail her. I think maybe he also showed them to Trey and Spence. Again, this was the good stuff that, of course, I was able to hear, to read. Coral Lee kidnaps their kid because of his part in the whole thing. And so this is what makes me think, because I did, even though I didn't actually get to read the letter that Coral Lee sent to Bree, because that was another chunk that didn't make it into my audiobook, what I gathered was that one of the pictures from the bunch that were also sent to her showed that Trey's story was incomplete. It was false. And so this is when I'm saying, all right, yes, like whatever they did was not right, but the story that I got wasn't enough to prove to me that Lexi was not a willing participant. On one hand, it's kind of great. Like, it's an unreliable narrator. But on the other hand, it was unsatisfying. And please correct me if I've really truly missed some important things. I disliked this book enough that I was not going to torture myself by going back and reading these parts or listening to these parts. Story that Trey gives to Bree is that Lexi went along with whatever Spence wanted. And so just my idea is that Lexi is somebody who, yes, she'd want to be part of his threesome. That was something she'd given to Spence previously as a gift, because he had given her a gift. And so that was what she did in return for him, as in thanks. And so I thought that part was a little bit wishy-washy. And Kelly, so she is under the impression that Jeffrey is still alive. She's under the impression that Bree is in the same boat as her, not knowing that Bree has other information. She just thinks that they share the kidnapping of a child, and they both have the opportunity to get their kids back. But then apparently whatever Coralie wrote to her, it probably revealed everything that happened to Lexi, and possibly the fact that she killed Jeffrey but had not killed Robert. This would naturally set Kelly off. And how, though, she found them at the restaurant, I don't know. I think the best part of this novel was the mystery of Lexi. We don't know Lexi is dead throughout this novel because Coralie keeps saying that her daughter is watching. It was really smartly worded. So Jackson's not lying. If you believe in afterlife and death, like, you know, like my loved one is watching you. And so it's not like she's lying, but she's not telling the truth, because even though Coralie has died, Trey and Bree are still under the assumption that Lexi Pine is out there and she's gonna come after them. She's gonna finish the business. They hired bodyguards to protect them. So how Kelly was able to find them at the restaurant, like know where they were that night, and then find them inside the restaurant, and then get past the security guards with a gun? A little implausible, but what you gonna do? Anywho, let's rewind to the beginning. And I guess this is something that I zoned out on, which goes to show how uninvested I was from the very beginning. And so, as I said, the story starts with Bree at her daughter's play practice. Although I'm gonna rewind it a little bit more to the very beginning, because it's not actually a bad opening. What happens is she wakes up and she believes that she sees a witch outside her window. What we learn is the witch is actually Coralie Pine. That I thought was confusing, because they live in this grand manor house. How in the world did Coralie get into their backyard? Because Bree wakes up and she gets Trey awake and she's like, there's somebody at the window. And he's like, how in the world could they get into the backyard? And she's thinking the same thing. So how in the world did this woman, this like 70-year-old woman who is dying from cancer, get into their backyard? And then on top of that, how did she get into their house? Actually, I think what happened was she stole one of the daughter's keys. But still, does this family not do an alarm? Like, how did she have the code to their house? I don't know. Maybe that was part of the book that didn't upload to my phone. Then we get to the school, and Bree is convinced that she sees the witch again in the parking lot. I really enjoyed that aspect, and I was extremely disappointed when nothing more came of it. I guess on one hand, I like how portraying Coralie as a witch definitely paints a picture in your head as to what she looks like, the kind of menace that she may present. But on the other hand, if you're going to open a book with the idea of a witch, my thought is that it's going to play a bigger part in the book. Is this something that Bree is afraid of? Like, does she believe in witches? Is this like going to be something paranormal-ish? Like, I was expecting it to play a bigger part, and all it really was a description, and it was just disappointing. It let me down. I was like, are we gonna blame the disappearance of a child on hexes and black magic? Like, where is this going? It's going nowhere. Now we are back at play practice, and I guess what happened, my half paying attention brain did not register the fact that Bree walked away from Robert. I had been thinking that she had been sitting there the whole time, and somehow he had been stolen, secreted away in his carrier. And so I was thinking the whole time, how in the world is she that unobservant? I guess she's not that unobservant. It's more of she walked away and then he was secreted away. But again, how in the world did Coral Lee get into the school? Like, how did she sneak into where they were sitting undetected? There were a lot of holes for me. And it was like, we just needed an easy in and an easy out. And that's what it was. Like, we weren't really gonna try to make this believable or realistic. That's when Bree goes to her house, finds the phone, finds the pills, and she is told that she'll get her kid back if she gives these pills to Spence. What it does is they kill him. And this was another thing. Like, from her discovering that Robert's gone to getting home, we don't actually see much. We find out Robert's gone, and then we move to Marshall. And what we're seeing from Marshall is, oh, woe is me, Kara, who's his daughter, Betsy, who is his dead wife, and Bree, who is the woman he now has feelings for. And all of a sudden, Bree is acting really funny and really suspicious, and like, I have no idea what's going on with her, and I don't actually believe what she's saying. And then we see Bree in the car, and she is just having a conniption. And the nice part of me kept saying, Beth, that's what happens when someone steals your child. You can't think straight. You're going to be going crazy. But the portrayal of it all, I thought was a bit absurd. I couldn't fully believe her actions and her thoughts. It was just like really intense and abrupt. And so then when she's at the party and all of a sudden she's like, oh, now I understood her telling Marshall, but her telling the lawyer, I was like, that's something I would have kept to myself. And I think it would have improved the tension of the novel, because it's this secret she has to keep. Because as soon as she gets legal aid involved, it's serious, it's legitimate. So even though Marshall is involved in securities and police work, he's her friend first. So, what him coming in and helping solve the mystery is completely different than enlisting the aid of a lawyer who you just can't take that back. I mean, granted, there is client-lawyer privilege, but you can't take that back. Like, once they know something, they know something, and naturally this lawyer wants to move forward in the correct legal matters or legal channels, but to do that means there's no story. And so I was like, I wish that had been left out. And what was interesting about this lawyer was how Spence was treating her. And so there was a good avenue for representing women in the workplace. So not only is she a female in a male-dominated profession, but she's a black female, and she doesn't come from a wealthy family. So there are a lot of great aspects to her character that are kind of thrown at us. And then on top of that, we get the fact that she's being sexually harassed. And it's like, what can she do because all these other mitigating factors, like she doesn't have a lot of a leg to stand on, and then we get nothing. Like, it's completely dropped, and she becomes an entirely irrelevant character. And so it's like, what was that all about? Like, really, what was that about? Why was that there? I didn't understand the love triangle or the love subplot, the romantic subplot between Marshall and Bree, because it was entirely one-sided until they're married at the end. I thought actually what would have been really interesting is if we learned that maybe Marshall and Bree were behind Trey's death, where she realized what kind of guy he was, and she realized that she was not going to come out a winner if their marriage dissolved, and so the way to get rid of him was to get him killed. And so, let's enlist Kelly or do something that'll set Kelly off so that she'll take matters into her own hands. And then, ta-da, they got married. Like, hello, we did something bad, now we're living our happily ever after. That would have been interesting, but instead it was just a really cheesy romantic ending. Aside from all the bad things, my favorite part, I think the aspect of this novel that was done the best, was the mystery, was the investigation of why did this happen, who did it, and why are these other characters involved? Like, how are they part of it? I wish it had been a bit more fast-paced, and I wished that we'd had more focus on that. Rather, we had a large focus on Bree's personal life, which to me was not interesting. I really could care less. Like, what's the point of all this? Like, where is it going? How is it developing anyone, except it gives us a little window into the fact that maybe things aren't actually over between Bree and Marshall. And then we get her meeting Trey. And it was sickly sweet. It wasn't well developed. I'm really glad it's over. Really glad. But then in reading all of these reviews, I'm also wondering what's wrong with me. Because a lot of people are seeing things I did not see. Anyways, it is time for dinner. I'm gonna go. See you later. Don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, do fun stuff like that. Bye.